What's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a React.js to-do app, but it's going to be special because this is going to have a Firebase backend. What does that mean? That means we're going to be utilizing Firebase cloud storage as a backend service to store all of our lists in our to-do app. We're going to be able to create new items. We're going to be able to read these items, of course. We're going to be able to update them and also delete them. That means we're going to have CRUD functionality with the Firebase platform, and I'm going to show you how to build all of this in React. By the way, it's going to be styled with Tailwind CSS because I'm a huge fan. So if you want to see how I built this, then let's get started. And just to give a quick example, this is it right here, a to-do app. As you can see here, I'm typing, we're gonna learn React. We might even learn some Firebase, and then maybe even grind some leak code here at the end, possibly, who knows. But as you can see, we have created our items. We can refresh the page, they're still there. We can close our server, restart our server, they're still there. We can update our information and we can delete them. And these are all being stored real time in the Firestore database provided by Firebase. So let's get started here, you guys. So I'm in VS Code. I am already in the directory I want to be working with. And what I'm gonna do first is go ahead and open up my terminal here. And what I'm going to do is install my React application. I'm gonna be using create React app with yarn. So I'm gonna type yarn create react-app, and I'm going to go ahead and install this in the current directory. So in the meantime, what I want to do is go ahead and we're going to install Tailwind. So let's cruise over to Tailwind CSS. If you're already familiar with Tailwind, you know how to configure it, then just jump through this part. I'm going to put some bookmarks at the bottom of the video so you can skip through it. But we're going to click Get Started, the framework guides, and then we're going to be using this Create React app here just to kind of jumpstart our application with Tailwind. So what it wants us to do first is create our project. We've already done that. So let's install Tailwind here. Go ahead and copy the complete line for using npm, but I'm using yarn. I'm going to make sure my picture is not in the way here. So once you copy that, let's go over to our application. Assuming that it is done installing, happy hacking, that means we are ready to get started. I'm going to go ahead and paste that. Oops, sorry. I need to say yarn add. Then I'm going to paste that in there. Copy the whole line, like I said, if you're using npm. So while that's installing, what we want to do is grab this next command here, this npx tailwind css init-p, and let's go ahead and run that command inside our terminal here. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, so let me go ahead and make sure I've installed this correctly since we hit that little yarn add. Okay, there it goes. Not sure what was going on there. Okay, let's copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. Looks to all be working fine. There we go. It created our tailwind.config file there. So inside of this content array, what we want to do is just copy over this little string right there. So I'm just going to paste it in here on the left. I'm going to go ahead and save and give it a nice little format there. Next, we're going to go over ahead here and copy this this text right here inside the index.css, and let's just throw that inside of our source folder. Here's where we're going to be working today. And inside this index.css, what we can do is actually just delete all of this stuff, and we're just going to replace it with these 3 Tailwind values right there, okay? So what I want to do next, now that Tailwind has been installed and configured, what I want to do is kind of just clean up some of this application. We're not really going to be using everything. So inside of this source folder, the app.css, the app.test, the logo.svg, report web vitals, and the setup test. Let's just go ahead and delete all of those just to clear some things up. We're not going to be using them, so just to clear up any confusion there. So we can close down Tailwind, okay? Let's shrink that down a bit. Now let's go ahead and start our development server. I'm going to type yarn start to get everything started up here. And what we should see, so I'm going to be running mine on port 3001. We should see just a blank white page. We're probably going to get some errors here. So let's go into the index.js and just kind of delete some of these files here. So this down here at the bottom, the report web vitals, we'll get rid of that. Importing the report web vitals, we'll get rid of that. Inside of the app.js, let's go ahead and delete all of this JSX code in here. We'll just leave the surrounding div tags. And then up here at the top, we'll just replace that with import React from React, just like that. Looking good. Okay, so now we have created our React application, we have installed Tailwind, and now we are ready to start building this thing. So what I want to do is let's go ahead and type out our code here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of type everything out, and then we'll come back and style it at the end. And I'm going to be using Tailwind, but I'm not going to type these all in line. I'm going to extract this to the top. I think it's going to be a lot easier for you guys to follow along, and we're still going to get the knowledge and the kind of basis of Tailwind. So for this outer div here, I'm just going to give everything some class names, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and give this outer div a class name, just like so. And we're going to use curly brackets, okay? And I'm going to say style.bg, just like so. Now, it says style is not defined. And like I said, we're going to be kind of extracting all of our Tailwind CSS to the top of the file. So what I want you to do, just under this import section and above the actual application here, above our function, this is where we're going to add in our styles, right? So I'm going to say const style, okay, equal to, and then we'll open up our curly brackets here. And in here is where we're going to add in our class name. So I said BG right in here. I'll go ahead and zoom it in just a bit there. So what I'm going to say is BG, we'll give a colon there. Then we're going to use backticks, you guys. Okay, so make sure you use the backticks. That's very important. Then what I'm going to say is, and this is kind of like the background of our project, I'm going to say H screen, which this isn't really a Tailwind tutorial, so I'm not going to go super in depth, but basically H screen means a height of 100 viewport height, and same with the width here. So width 100 viewport width. So that's what we're going to be saying right there. And then what I want to say is P-4. I'm going to see a BG gradient to right. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to copy this over so I see the hex code I'm using. And what I'm going to say, here we go, is from, and then you can type in a color. I'm going to be using my own hex code. So if we use brackets, we can actually use custom values in Tailwind. So let's open up our brackets here, and our hex code is going to be, don't need two of those. This is the color I'm going to be using. So you can see a nice blue on the left, and then we'll say from that right there, and then we'll say to. Let's open up our brackets again, and I'm going to copy over this hex code that I'm going to be using here. Let's go ahead and paste that in. And now you can see we have our nice background. So moving forward, what I'm going to do next is go ahead and finish typing out all of the JSX, and then we'll come back and style everything. I just wanted to show you this first div, how we're going to style everything with Tailwind. So I think this will be a lot easier for you guys to follow along. So next, let's go ahead and create another div. So I can't use my shortcuts because this is a JS file. And what I want to do is actually just change this over to a JSX file. So if you click that little JavaScript button at the bottom, we just type React. Basically, it's just going to allow us to write JSX. It's going to use our snippets a little bit, and we can create elements a lot easier just like that. So in here for this div, let's give this a class name, and this is going to be style.container. Okay. And then below that container, we're going to have an H3. So let's give this an H3, and I'm going to give this a class name. Okay. And this is going to be style.heading. And I'm just going to say to do app, just like that. Okay. So next, let's have our form. Okay. So we're going to have a form, and we don't need an action for this here. Just don't need an action. We're going to give this a class name, however, and it's going to be style.form. So inside of our form, what are we going to have here? So we're going to have an input section here. So we're going to have input type text, and then just a button on the right. So let's have an input, and that's going to be a type of text. Let's give it a placeholder, and the placeholder is just going to say, add to do, just like that. And then we're probably going to need to give this input a class name as well. So give that a class name of style.input. Okay. Then just below that input, let's do a button here that says, we're going to use React icons for this actually. So we'll add that package here in just a minute, but let's give this a class name real quick of style.button. Okay. So like I said, we're using React icons. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a little terminal here side by side, just say yarn add React icons, React-icons. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really, really awesome tool. I use it all the time. So here, if you just Google React icons, this is the site that it is that we're using. So I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but just know it's pretty easy to use, and you have lots of really cool icons. So the one I'm going to be using is called AI Outline Plus, and it's just a little plus sign that we're going to use for our button. So let's open up our bracket there, AI Outline Plus, just like that, okay? And what we can also do is give this a size property. It's a feature of React icons. So I'm going to say size 30. Now we're getting an error because we have not imported it at the top. So let's go ahead and import this at the top here. So we're going to import, going to put this in curly brackets from react-icons/AI. And the AI is just a little subfolder that is at the beginning of our icon. So just if you're using React icons in the future on many different projects, if you have different little pretext there, you're going to have to import those on different lines. So after we have the button, what we're going to do now, so that concludes our form. And now what we're going to have is our unordered list here, and then we're going to have our list items. So let's go right beneath our form here. We're going to have an unordered list there. And the unordered list does not really need any styling. And then we're going to have some list items. Now, the way we're going to lay this out, we're actually going to have a another component here just to keep things clean. So I'm going to open up my side menu here. By the way, I'm just pressing the Command B button, toggle my side menu back and forth. So inside our source folder, and you guys, usually I'd create like a components folder, but since this is only going to have one extra component, I'm just going to throw it in here. So you guys get the point. So todo.jsx, I'm going to type refce. It's going to get me my functional component here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and type this out in here. So what we're going to have here, this is just going to be a list item, just like that. And we're going to use a couple React icons here. And what we're going to do first is just kind of hard code a couple to-dos in here. So let's go ahead and, you know what, let's just add that as some state. And let's go ahead and do that right now so we can go ahead and access it and see how it looks. So let's go back to our app.js. And inside here at the top, we're going to import the useState hook, okay? And our state is going to go inside of our functional component here, above the return. So we're going to say const, open up our brackets here, and that's going to be equal to useState. Go in our state in there. So I'm going to call this, make it relevant to-dos, and set to-dos, just like that. Now, we have to give this some initial state. And what we're going to do, we're eventually going to put this in a database, but for now, we're going to have an array of a few to-dos. So let's have an array in here, and I'll have a few to-dos here. I'll say learn React is one, and then we'll say grind some leak code questions there. I've been doing some leak code lately. It's Code War, so I might make a video about that and kind of the platforms I like to use. There is one I like to use before leak code when I was first starting. Long story short, when I first started on leak code, all the problems seemed like incredibly difficult, even the easy ones. So there are some other platforms I encourage people to start out on before you work up to leak code. But anyways, let's go to our to-do app. Okay, well, first, let's see here. Let's go ahead and add in our to-do just like that. And we have to import this. It's not auto importing. That's okay. So import to-do from, and this is right here in our file where we are. So import to-do, there it is. And as you can see, it's pulling over our component already. So in here, we delete that. That should go away. So we're gonna have our list item, and let's go ahead and give this some styling as well. So we'll say const style. We're gonna do the same thing kind of over in here, just like that there. So for our list item, I'm gonna give this a class name, and we're gonna use some ternary operators here. Can we kind of toggle our state back and forth, or sorry, not our state, but toggle back and forth whether the item is completed or not. So we're gonna have some CSS changes in here. But for now, what I'm going to say is to do, or sorry, let's say style dot, and we'll just say li for now. And then underneath this, let's go ahead and say, we're gonna have a div here, and this div here is gonna be a row. So let's give this a class name, style.row, there we go. Then inside here, we're gonna have a couple things. We're gonna have an input, okay? And this input is gonna be, ooh, not that one right there, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I get this right, but it's input, and we're looking for the checkbox. There we go. Okay, so we don't need the name or ID. In fact, I think that's going to be good for now. We'll come back and add some properties to it here in a minute. And after the input, this is just like say going to be the checkbox. What we're going to have is a p tag, and this is going to be our to do. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and pass in to do just like that. And let's give this a class name just like that. And we'll say style. Don't worry about the error. We're going to come back in a minute. Style.text. Okay, so we're getting an error said to do is not defined. So what we're going to do here, and this is the state that we're going to be passing through temporarily. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So just below this unordered list here inside the app.js, let's open up some curly brackets. And our state here is to-dos, right? So in set to-dos, we have two strings inside of our array there. So we're going to map through these things since it's an array. So what I'm going to say is to-dos.map, then open up some curly brackets. This is going to take in an arrow function. And what we want to say in here is actually we're going to map through everything, give it the name of to-do. And then what we're going to say, we're going to open up some parentheses. So we're going to render out a value. And this to-do, little to-do component, we can just shift up and we're going to render through all of these to-dos. So still going to get some errors. That's fine. What I want to do is kind of give this an index at first. React likes to needs to have keys and their list that we're mapping through. I'm just going to say key index just like that. Then we need to pass in the to-do. So I'm just going to say to-do, just to-do. And this is called just passing state down in components. So we're also going to pass them up via functions. I'm going to show you how to do that here in a little bit. So now that we're creating our to-do that we're passing down, we have to just accept that in here. And rather than saying props, we can just keep this destructured. I'm going to say to-do just like that. Then in here, you can actually see this mapping through all of our state. So it doesn't look great yet because we haven't finished styling it, but we're just about there. So next, just below this div here, this div is going to surround the input in our p tag. Next, just have a button. And inside here, we're going to have another React icon is FAREG trash. Oops, I forgot we need to put this in our angle brackets there. Make sure we close that off. And let's go ahead and import that. So let's cut that or paste, or sorry, copy it. Import, paste in some curly brackets from react-icons/FA. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we're done with the this component here. We haven't given it any styling yet. And then the app.js, what we want to do is just add one more thing below here, and that is going to be just our little count right there. So let's just go ahead and we'll just go ahead and hard code that in there. So just below our unordered list, we're going to have a p tag, and we'll just say you have two to-dos. And we'll just hard code in there for now, and we'll make this dynamic here in just a little bit. And let's give that a class name. Class name, we'll say style.count. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually go through everything and just give it some styles, and that's going to be real easy to do with the way that we laid this out. So really important up here at the styles, or at the style up here at the top, what we want to do is actually separate each line with a comma. If you don't, you're going to get an error. So our first one is background. Next one is going to be container, just like that. So let's say container. And then again, remember, we have to use backticks here. And what I want for the container, I'm going to give it a background of slate 100. And that's going to be kind of just like an off white there, kind of very faint white. And then what we want is I want a max width of, again, I'm going to use some brackets here so I can give a hard-coded value, custom value, 500 pixels. We'll say width full, margin, auto, rounded, MD. It's going to round the corners off a little bit. Then we'll say shadow -XL and then P-4 for just a little bit of padding. Okay, so looking good so far. So next, let's just go over and remember we have to add our comma there. So next, let's style our H3, which is our heading that we gave a class to. So we'll say text-3XL. It's going to bump up the size a little bit. Next, we want to, let's see, text-3XL. We'll say, make sure it is font bold, text-center, so it sits in the middle of the screen. And we'll say text gray. I'm going to say 800, so it's not really a black, but it's still pretty dark. And I will say P-2 to give it some padding here. So not seeing any changes there. Wonder what's going on. Let's give this a refresh there. What's going on? So heading. That's right. Class name, style.heading. I spell that right? Yeah. Make sure. Sorry, you guys. Style.heading. Okay. Going on. Let's go ahead. I'm going to stop the server real quick and just restart it here. It looks like I have everything correct. Text. 3XL. Got my commas. Oh, yep, misspelled something. There we go. Okay, so sometimes Tailwind just acts kind of funky. So let's add another comma here after the heading, and we're going to move on to the form. So what we can say is just form. And again, we're going to use our backticks. So flex, justify, between. Okay, go. Now let's give this another comma. And next, let's hit our input here. And with our input, what we want to say is border. We're going to say P-2, okay, width of full, then text, XL, just to beef up the text a little bit. There, that's going to spread it across the screen. Perfect. Now next is going to be our button, and that's just going to be surrounding our little plus sign over there. So let's add our backtick, and for our button, I'm going to say border. I'm going to say P-4, margin left 2, just so there's a little bit of space in between our inputs. And then what we'll say, anything above small, actually we want to have, and this is just a media query here, so anything above small, I'm going to say margin top 0. Might even not need any of that there. Let's just leave that out for now. So then we'll say background purple, and we'll say 500. And again, just for the way colors work in Tailwind, so I'm putting in 500. If you're going to put 100, that would be a lot lighter, just in case you're not familiar. I believe it goes from 100 to 900. 900 would be quite dark. So just a little quick rundown on some colors there. These are all just default styles in Tailwind. And again, if you didn't want to use that, you could just remove the purple and the number 500 and just use brackets like we did with the background gradient, and just enter in your own hex code or RGBA or whatever you want to use there. So just a little quick rundown on the colors. And the same goes with the text. So that's with any value in Tailwind. So slate, I'm going to say 100, just so it's like kind of a off-white there. So everything is looking good, you guys. Next, we're just going to style the count with a count just like that. And I just want to say text center, and then P-2 padding of that's actually like 8 pixels. So that looks good right there. Now let's just hop over to do our to-do component here, and let's just style off our to-do list here so it looks a little bit nicer. Excuse me. So list item, we're gonna go ahead and type that one out. And what do I say for list item? And actually, we're going to add in, like I said, we're going to have styles both for completed task and then also styles for incomplete task. And we're going to go ahead and add all those in right now, and then we'll come back and use our logic later to figure them out. So we'll say flex, justify, between, just like that. We'll say BG slate 200, okay? And this is what all of our list items are going to look like when they are not capitalized there, when they are not completed. So that is looking good right there. So I just want to, like I said, I don't need to go through all these styles, but capitalized, we want everything to be capitalized, just looking nice. So next, this is going to be, it's going to be LI complete is what I'm going to call it. And this is what it's going to look like if it is a completed task. So I'm going to say flex. Basically, everything's going to be the same. So let's just copy this top one there, just like that. But instead of slate 200, I'm just going to change this to 400, just like so. Okay. And then next, like I said, we're going to add the logic later. Let's do our row, and that's just going to be flex. Okay. Then next, we're going to have our text. Okay. And for our text, what I want to say is margin left 2, just like that. Then cursor pointer, just like that. Okay. Then after our text, I'm going to have text complete, which we haven't added in yet. This is another one that we're going to add in our logic later. So cursor dash pointer, and then line through, just like that. And for our last one, we're just going to have our button. And it is almost time to do some Firebase. So cursor pointer, flex, and then items center. So looks good. This is how our app's going to look. Of course, there's no functionality right now. We can click, nothing happens, can't delete anything. But just for example, this LI, we're going to toggle it to LI complete after we complete a task, and it's going to do something like that. So of course, it's not going to do that to all of them. We're going to come back and render out each one. So let's go ahead and remove that. So next, what I want to do is go ahead and let's configure Firebase and get this thing dynamic and be able to create, read, update, and delete, add all this wonderful functionality to our application. So let's go on over to Firebase. We'll say firebase.google.com. And what we're going to say is go to the console here at the top right. Now, this is the application I created. What you're going to want to do here is, let's create a new application. So I'm just going to create a new one here with you guys. We can do this together. To do app, I'll say YT for YouTube there. So go ahead and click continue. And by the way, you guys, this is 100% free. You don't have to give them a credit card, nothing like that. So let's get rid of that. I don't need the Google Analytics for this project. So that'll just kind of weigh things down. So go ahead and create your project. This is very quick, you guys. Only takes just a couple of minutes here. So this is awesome, you guys. Smash the like button if you feel like you're getting some value out of this. You're enjoying. If you're learning Firebase for the first time, it's a very, very powerful tool, and it's really simple to use. So really, really simple. So it looks like it's already done being completed. So this is the website it's going to forward us to. What we want to do next is create the application for the web. So we're going to click this button right here for the web, and we'll just say another just to do app, just like that. Register your app. Now we're going to start getting into the coding side of Firebase. So what we need to do is install Firebase. That is our first command here. So I'm using yarn. I'm going to say yarn add Firebase, just like that. npm npmi Firebase, or just copy that if you're using npm. So what we're going to need to do is go into this source folder here. We're going to create a new file called Firebase.js, not JSX, just JS. There's not going to be any JSX code in here. And then what we're going to do is copy this. And you guys, these are your secret keys. Don't just copy mine, though I am going to put a link to this build down in the description below, and it's going to be up on GitHub for you to clone. However, when you run my project, it's not going to work because I'm not going to be including any of my keys into my GitHub project. Okay, so use your own keys. It's very, very simple. Don't use mine. And if you are going to host this, then make sure you hide these keys in a .env file. So this is what we want to do. Just copy that over just like so. That's perfect. Go ahead and continue to the console. Now, once we're in our console, right, this is kind of like where we're going to be working out of. We're going to click this build button on the left side, and we're looking for the Firestore database. And this is real cloud storage for Google, for Firebase here. So what we want to do is just create a new database. We can start in test mode is fine. Go ahead and click start. Just choose the Firestore location that's closest to you. It should default to the closest one to you anyways. So let's go ahead and click started. It says it's provisioning our account. So this is very, very easy, guys, and it's just about done. It's usually quite quick. Setting up the security rules. So that is all we need to do. So what we want to do actually is install, or rather configure, cloud storage into our Firestore into our application. So what you can do here, if you want, I'm going to go to the docs just to show you how to do this. It's really quite easy. Firebase has some really, really great documentation for you to read. So I encourage you to read through it if you're learning Firebase. And we're just going to click that build. And over off here to the left are all the projects or products that they offer. Again, we're using Firestore. You see, click on the get started. Let's scroll down. And by the way, you guys, we're using version 9 modular, the most up-to-date version of Firestore here, or of Firebase. So what we need to do is import get Firestore from Firebase. Let's just go ahead and copy that. If you look at our code off here to the left, it says add SDKs here for Firebase products you want to use. So that's just what we're going to do. Go ahead and paste that in there just like so. Then down here at the bottom, what we're going to say is we want to export const, because we want to have access to this throughout our application. Export const DB for database here. Okay. Then I'm just going to say get Firestore, and then we want to pass through app just like that. Now that's all we need to do inside of our Firebase.js file. So we can go ahead and close that. Just make sure you import the get Firestore, then also export const DB, and that's going to be equal to get Firestore passing through the app. Okay. So we can go ahead and close that. And I'm going to close the docs for now because I'm not really going to go off the documentation, though I do recommend reading it if you're learning Firebase. So now that we're in, let's go back to our app level here. And what I want to do, okay, so what I want to do, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and create create a collection here. And the way Firebase works, collections is kind of known as a database. So you can think of collections as the database, and then every little articles within your collection are actual like objects or however you want to store them. So I'm going to say generate an auto ID, and this is just an ID for the article inside your database field. I'm going to say text there, and that's going to be a string, and I'll say learn. We just type in learn React. Okay. And let's give this another field that says completed. And we'll give this a Boolean value here. And we're going to do this all with code as well. I'm just setting it up this way. We'll say false. Okay, so let's go ahead and click save. And it generates our, this is our article right here, or our document, sorry. Our document is what that refers to. And then each document can have properties. So what we're going to say, I'm going to create another document here. And this one will have an auto ID, and this one can be text, and this one we'll say Ryan elite code, just like that. Okay, and we'll have a completed Boolean here. We'll change this to false. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. Okay, and now what we want to set up first. Okay, let's go into our app and shrink this down a bit. So right now we have everything hard coded, and what we're going to do is let's in here. Just above the return, but below our state, we're going to have a few different things. What we want to do is we're going to say create our CRUD functionality here, create to do. Then we're going to have a read to do, read it from Firebase. Okay. We'll say update do in Firebase, and then delete to do. This is our to-do list within our to-do application. So let's start off with the read to-dos here. So, and what I'm going to do here is we're going to be using the use effect hook. There's many different ways you can do this. Like I said, I'm going to be using the use effect hook. Okay. So what I want to do first is let's just go ahead and import that hook at the top. React, my VS Code does not seem to be importing things for me lately. So, but that's all good. So use effect just like that. And that's just going to take in an arrow function. And I'm going to pass in just a dependency array here so it doesn't fire over and over again and cause like a memory leak here. So what we want to have here, I'm going to say const, and basically this is just kind of defining a path for our database. And I'm just going to store this in a const by the name of q, and that's going to be equal to query. Okay, query. They're going to open up our parentheses here, and we'll say collection. And then we're going to have another parentheses here, and we'll say DB, and then the name of our database, which is to-dos. Okay. And we're getting some errors. So we need to import things from Firebase. So first, what we need to import, let's go over here, and we're going to import to-do. Okay. Or sorry, let's go down here. Let's import our DB there. And that's the const that we exported. So we'll say import, we got to put this in curly brackets from, and that's from the Firebase file that we created. So next, what we can do here, the rest we need to import from Firestore, and we're going to do that with our import, some curly brackets, and one's query, the other one is collections, what we just used, and this is going to be from Firebase/Firestore. So that should take care of all of the errors that we see there. Now let's move on with our use effect here. So what we're going to have here, we need a const unsubscribe, just like that. And that's going to be equal to on snapshot. And this is like taking a snapshot, kind of like a picture of our database in Firebase, and then reading it to us so we can render out on the screen. So on snapshot, that's kind of how I think of it. So using Q, and that's the kind of like the path that we're passing in here. Okay. So Q, and then we're going to have query snapshot, just like that. And then we're going to use an arrow function here. And what we're going to pass in, we're going to have our let, we're going to create an array here. So we'll say let, we'll say to-dos array, and we're going to set that to an empty array for now. Then we'll, just below that, we'll say query snapshot dot, we're going to use the for each. And then for each doc, you can name this whatever you like. Whoop. Pass in an arrow function here by name it. I'm just going to name mine doc. Okay. And then in here, we can say to-dos dot array dot push. Sorry, this is to-dos array, not to-dos dot array. This is our array here that we just created. And then we want to push everything into our array. And this is going to be a lot easier whenever we update our arrays as well. So what we're going to do for our push, we're going to be using a spread operator here. So what we can say is on our object here, doc.data, there we go. And then we'll say id doc.id. And this is the ID of our array here. So don't worry about that. We're going to come back to that here in just a minute. But once we have our snapshot, we want to just set that to our state, which is our to-dos right here. So the way we'll do that, we'll just say set to-dos. And then in here, we can just say the to-dos array. And that's the to-dos array that we just created as an empty array. And then we're using the for each method to push each object in our array into the new array. So in that, we're passing in the to-dos array. And then just below that, we just need to unsubscribe. So we'll return our little arrow function here, unsubscribe, just like that. Okay, well, function. Okay, so we're gonna get an error there, and that's because we just need to import this on snapshot, just like that. Okay, zoom out here for you now. So now let's go ahead and let's delete this our state in here, because right now it's pulling through our state. So let's just delete this and set it to an empty array. And hopefully if we did everything right, we should not see any changes. Of course, we didn't do anything right. So let's go ahead and look, inspect. So objects are not valid as React child. So let me tell you why this is happening. If we go over, so right now we're passing through our state down to our child component here in our to-do component. And if we go to our to-do component right now, we're just rendering through an object, and you can't actually render through objects. It says objects are not valid as React child. So if you look at our Firebase right here, we actually have a text is that we actually want to render out on the screen. So if we just go back here, instead of rendering to do here in our p tag, if we just say to do.text, that should remove that, and we now have that should remove all the errors there. So now if we refresh, we should see our all of our items being mapped through. And if we want to, let's go ahead and we'll change this learn React is what we see right here. Let's change that to learn Firebase. Can't really see here. I'm going to bump that open a little bit. So we'll just say learn Firebase, update, and then we should see that on our screen. There you go, learn Firebase. Okay, so great. Now we are able to read all of our data from Firebase. So next, what we want to do is probably, let's go ahead and toggle being able to update our data here. So, and what we can actually go ahead and do now, let's go ahead and add in our logic on our to-do component to kind of like change our CSS, our Tailwind, depending on whether or not the list item has been completed or the to-do item has been completed. So the way we're going to do that, let's go over to our right here for our class name, and what we'll say here. Okay, so let's just cut that out. And what we're going to say, we're going to leave the curly brackets, and we're just going to use a ternary operator in here. What we'll say, if to-do.completed, and where we're getting the completed, you guys, right now, like we did the to-do text, the to-do is our access to this point right here. And then we say to-do text to render out our text. Or if we say to-do completed, we're going to have access to that Boolean value, which is a true false. So if to-do completed, if that is true, what we want to have rendered out for our CSS is style.li complete. Else, if it's not complete, we just want to render out style.li. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for our checkbox here, I believe. Not our checkbox. We're going to want to do that for, and also the text. Our checkbox is going to be a little bit different though. So what we're going to say for our checkbox is, first off, we want to have a checked attribute here, and then we'll say, instead of just saying checked like that, because that would just render out everything as being checked, and we don't want that. So what we can say is, like I said, just like we did above, if to-do.completed is true, then yes, we want to render out checked. Else, we can just leave this as an empty string there. So, and like I said, everything right now is by default false. So that looks good there. And then let's just do our text as well. leave the brackets in there, and we'll say if to-do.completed is true, then we want to have the style.text complete, else we just want the style text. I hope this is making sense for you guys. If it is, leave me a comment down in the comments below and let me know how I'm doing. And smash the like button, you guys. I'd really appreciate that. It helps the YouTube algorithm. So let's go ahead and save. Go ahead and refresh. Getting an error. That's because we haven't used the we haven't used an on change event for our checkbox. So let's go ahead and do that right. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that right now. So what we're going to do, and real quick, I just want to show you guys, if we change this learn Firebase, let's change this Boolean value to true, and we'll see if we can see anything. There you go, perfect. But we can't do this on the client side yet, just on the back end side. So what I want to do, let's just change that back to false. Now let's go ahead and set up a function so we can update our database, okay? And we're actually going to be able to pass. You can't really pass state up, only down in React components, but we can pass up functions, and we can kind of lump state in there as well. So what we want to do here in our we're going to actually add this a couple different places here, but it's going to be toggle complete is going to be our function. Okay, you can call it whatever you like though. So toggle complete, that's not like a Firebase term. So toggle complete, just like that, and we're going to pass this in inside of our to-do component here. And I'm going to have this on a couple different spots here. So whenever we have a user click the text or the checkbox. So let's start off on our text here for now. So I'm going to say on click, and on click, what we want to do is run this toggle complete. So it's just going to be an arrow function, toggle complete. Then we want to pass in the to do. Okay. And let's just kind of do the same thing on the input, but rather than on click, it wants us to have an on change. So we'll do that on change, same thing, pass in toggle complete, then pass in the to do. So let's go ahead and save. Perfect. So we're passing this up. Now what we want to do next is actually go into our app.js file, and we're going to add in our update to do code here. But before we have access to that, just like we pass down state, when we're passing up our function, we kind of have to do the same thing. So I'm going to call this toggle complete just to kind of keep everything streamlined and easy to understand and use. So now we have access to this function that we're kind of passing upstream, if that makes sense. So let's put this code inside of our update to do here. That's what makes sense. So, and you can actually see on the screen, toggle complete is not defined, and that's where we're going to define right now. So I'm going to say const toggle complete, and this is going to be an asynchronous function. So we'll just say async, just like that there. An arrow function, and we want to do is pass in to do. And remember, because we passed it in the to do component, and this is where we passed it in, right there. So that's how we have access to this here. And then what we want to say is await, and then here we get to some Firebase. We're going to say update doc, okay? And in here, we're grabbing the doc, and then we're looking for DB, and then we're accessing the to-dos, just like that. And then we need the ID of the document that we're going to be updating, and we have access to that as to the ID. We don't need to put that in quotes, but we have access to that by to-do.id. And then in here, we can just change the completed. That's what we want to toggle. And we can just use our logical operator here, and we'll just say to-do.completed. So by doing this, it means that we're going to change the, we're just going to change the Boolean value from false to true, and vice versa. So the errors that we're getting are just the Firebase terminology that we haven't imported at the top. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say update doc, then also doc, and that should take care of all those questions, or those all those red flags there. So let's go ahead and refresh. Now, if we click on this, if we did everything right, hey, there you go. Now we have, let's refresh and make sure everything's working. And now if we go to our Firebase backend here, whoops, click the wrong thing. We're looking in Firebase. So we should have our, let's refresh here. It should change all of our state to true. So you can see our completed is now true, and for the learn Firebase is true as well. So now we have we're able to read our data in here in Firebase, and we're also able to update it. Now, what we probably would like to do is actually be able to create a new ID or a new document or to do and push that to Firebase. So let's go ahead and do that one next. Okay, so pretty cool here. We're learning create, read, update, delete functionality in Firebase inside of React with Tailwind sprinkled on top. I love this Tailwind, you guys. Now you guys are loving it too by the looks of it. I get a lot of comments. Everybody seems to love Tailwind, just the amount of time it saves people writing out code. So, all right, for our create to do, let's do that next. And what we're gonna have here, I'm gonna give this a const, and you can call this whatever you like. I'm gonna say create to do, that makes sense. Of course, we're gonna be using an asynchronous function here. And what we wanna do is pass in an event, and I'm gonna show you why we're gonna do that. We don't actually want our form to, or our page to reload. So that's why we're gonna do that. We're gonna say prevent default, just like that. Okay, and let's go ahead and give that a save there. So we need to hook this up to something, and it probably makes sense to just put that on our form. So if we find our form right here, for our form, what we can say is on submit. And then whenever we submit our form, basically we just want to run that function, which is the create to do. So what we'll say is create to do, just like that. And now whenever we submit our form, it's just going to run our create to do function. So if we just go ahead and refresh here, whenever we submit our form, you can see it submitting. Our page is not actually reloading, and that's why we like to do the prevent default. Okay, so next, after the prevent default, let's have a little if check here, because it doesn't make any sense if somebody tries to submit the form and the form is blank. Let's give up like a little error to the user. So first off, let's add a little if check, and what we'll say, well, actually first, you guys, let's delete that. What we need to do is actually have some state to manage the text that's being typed inside of our input box. So can't believe I forgot that. So let's go up here and let's say const, and we'll have input and set input. Okay, again, you can call this whatever you like. So use state, let's set this to just an empty string by its default value. And then let's go down here to our input form here. So our actual input, what we want to say here, I'm going to give this a value of input. Okay, and then I want to on change, and there's many different ways you can do this. I'm going to have an on change. Then whenever this form is submitted, it's going to take that input, the value that's inside our input form, and it's going to store that inside of our state that's called input. So we'll say on change, and then in here, what we'll say is for our on change event, what we're just going to pass through is we'll say pass through event, and then we're going to set input event.target value. And guys, you can say E or you can say event. I'm just keeping it a little bit short there, so hope I didn't confuse anybody with that. So zoom out there. So like we said, on the, we'll give that a save so it gets formatted for you guys. On the input, we have the value set to input, and we have an on change, and that's setting our input to the event.target.value. Let's go ahead and give that a refresh. Now, if we just console.log this real quick, guys, we're going to console.log the input. Whenever we type in here, you should see at the bottom, you can see our text being rendered out on the screen, and which is cool. That's what we want. We just don't need to render it out. So you can see it rendered out in the console. Sorry. So now we have access to that input inside of our text field there. So next, let's stay in here. So just below, let's go ahead and add our if check here, right? So what we'll say here is if, and we have input. So if the input is equal to, and we'll just say if it's equal to like an empty string, then we'll go ahead and we can shove an alert or something like that. So let's just go ahead and say if input is equal to an empty string, for example, what we can say is we'll just use an alert and say, please enter a valid to do, something like that. Okay, so now everything is blank. If we hit the enter button, you'll see we have this pop up here. It says please enter a valid to do. Okay, so now we have our little check going. And you guys, actually, we need to return that. If you don't add a return statement, it'll actually continue running our code, and we don't want that. whenever we throw up that alert, we want to stop the code and not proceed with adding. Otherwise, it's going to add a blank item into our to-do into our database. So make sure you add the return there so it just stops the code right there in its tracks. So now what we want to do is actually add use our Firebase code, and we want to, again, this is asynchronous functions. We're going to say await, and then we're going to say add doc, okay? And this is going to be into the collection of database, and our database is called to-dos. And you guys, I know we already created our database in here, and I'll show you what I mean. You don't have to do that first. Whenever we just did that because we did the read first. However, you don't have. This is actually going to create a new database even if one is not there. So, and if it is there, it's just going to update it. So, and I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment. So, after we add doc collection or database and to-dos, okay, what we want to add is text, and this is our text field. So this is configuring everything for us, so we actually don't have to do that. So input like that, and we want completed. By default, it just makes sense to have this default to false. And then what we can do is just set our, or that's all we need to do right now. We will set our input. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So add doc, let's go ahead and do this. Add doc, that should remove all of our errors there. So we have, let's see, our two things in here. Our learn Firebase and grind leak code. Now let's say we want to learn React. Let's go ahead and submit that. Ooh, now we have 3 to-dos, and you can see, where is it? There it is. Perfect, you guys. So if we can do anything, we'll say go work out. Perfect. Now it doesn't make any sense. Our input is not clearing, and that's a real easy fix. That's what I was about to do just a minute ago. So just outside of this add doc, what we can just do is just set the input, and we'll just set it back to an empty string. So go for a run. There we go. Okay, and now it empties back to an empty string. So great. Now we have a bunch of to-dos in our back end here. So next, what we want to do, let's go ahead and take care of this down here at the bottom. So right now we just have it hard coded that says you have, blank to-dos. So first, what I want to do is, let's see here, let's find it here at the bottom. So what I want to say, let's just put this in some backticks right there. And if we use backticks, we can actually add a template. Literal is what we're going to add, and that's basically just a value in JavaScript. So what we're going to do is the $ there, and then our curly brackets. And what we can just say is to-dos.length. Whoops, there's something wrong there. What I want to do here, we need to open that in some curly brackets there. All right, backticks, and then you have to-dos.length, to-dos. So now we should see you have 5 to-dos. If we delete one here, learn Firebase, hey, we just learned Firebase. Let's go ahead and delete this, delete document. Yes, you can see you now have 4 to-dos. Now, and also you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and show you, let's delete our entire collection. To-dos is asking us, do we want to confirm? Yes, so now you can see we have no database here. I mean, we have a database, but we haven't started a collection or anything. And that's what this create input is gonna do. Or sorry, our create to-do is gonna create a new collection and then add in our custom fields. So you see we have 0 to-dos. And also this brings me to another point real quick. Let's just not even show this message if we don't have any to-dos in there. So let's just do this right here. Underneath the unordered list, I'm going to open up some curly brackets, and we'll say if we can say if to-dos.length is less than 1. If that is true, then let's just we'll just return in null. Else we can just paste this in here. So got that and paste it in there. And so by doing so, that should remove our to-dos. Now, if again, just to recap, we have no collection here. If we say, hey, we want to learn React, go ahead and enter. It now appears we have 1 to-do, and you can see it created, well, actually, I'm sure it did. Let's refresh. And there it goes. You can see it created our collection, added the document, and the values in there. So, and of course, we can toggle through everything. Perfect. So one more thing, you guys, let's make sure we can actually delete an item from Firebase, delete a document. Whoop. So let's go ahead and do that next, you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and save, get it nice and formatted. So next, let's go into our to-do component. And what we're gonna do next is add that delete functionality. And we're gonna do that with a function that we're gonna pass up as well, because you need to pass in an ID in order to delete a document from Firebase. So just like you would in if you're deleting something from your state, you have to have an ID. So let's do that. We'll say, so we have the toggle complete. What we can also say is another one that we'll say delete to do. So let's say delete to do, just like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy that. Now let's just add this on our little button here. So I'll say on click, and on click, what we want, have a arrow function, and we'll say delete to do. And then here's where we want to pass in to do.id. Okay, so that is looking good. So let's just to recap here. On click, passing in our arrow function delete to do, and passing in the to do.id. And the ID, you guys, is auto generated for us. So so that's where it's grabbing the ID from. So let's go back into our app here. And just like we did with our passing our state down and passing up our functions here, I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to say delete to do equal to delete to do. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I know that was kind of quick. So we have our key index, and we also have to do that we're passing down, and we have our toggle complete, the component, or the function rather, that we're passing up, and the delete to do, also the function that we're passing up. So now that we have access to that, we're getting that error saying, hey, delete to do is not defined. So let's we have create, read, update. Now delete to do, we're going to put that in. We're going to put that in right there. So for our delete to do, let's go ahead and just paste that in there. Const delete to do. And you guys, this is going to be another asynchronous function here. And then we'll make this an arrow function. And inside here, it's going to be real easy. We just need to await. Then our Firebase code here, delete doc, and then we have to say database, or sorry, doc here, and then it's going to look for our database of to-dos, and then we need to pass it the ID, okay? And we're gonna just pass that in here at the top, just like so, and that should be all we need to do. That looks good. So now again, we just have to add in that Firebase term delete doc, that method there. So once we give that a save, let's go ahead and refresh, you guys. So we have our one to do, and let's see if we click this, it should delete if there's no problems. There you go. Let's check our back end here, and there you go. It deleted our document, but it maintains our collection. So let's just recap here. Let's make sure we can see we learn React, learn Firebase. Didn't get around to grinding any LeetCode, but I'm going to be doing that next. And then maybe learn Tailwind. And what did we get accomplished today? Learn Tailwind, learn React, learn Firebase. Great. So let's just delete those off our list real quick, just making sure they're in here. And let's just delete these off our list. We still have some grinding LeetCode to do. Perfect. You guys, thanks for watching. Smash the like button if you feel like you got some value out of this. You just learned CRUD functionality, building a simple to-do app with a Firebase backend in React style with Tailwind CSS. Thanks for watching, you guys. Subscribe to the channel so you can get some more of me, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.